E.V. Ramakrishnan is a bilingual poet, writing in both English and Malayalam. He has contributed as a poet, as a literary critic, as an editor, as a professor, as a researcher, as a research guide, and as an administrator. He is arguably the most illustrious English language poet produced by Kerala after Kamala Das. Among his important collections are A Python in a Snake Park and Being Elsewhere in Myself. The poetry of E.V. Ramakrishnan attempts to capture the essence of Indian life using everyday diction and homely images. Mending Shoes is a highly anthologized poem of E.V. Ramakrishnan. The poem has an interesting title, even an intriguing title, Mending Shoes. The student of literature is immediately reminded of the much more famous poem, King Wall, by Robert Frost. He may also be reminded of the opening scene of William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where the second citizen, who is a cobbler, says that he is a mender of bad souls. The pun, of course, is on soul, S-O-U-L and S-O-L-E. The title of the poem is Mending Shoes. To mend means to repair, to correct, to return something to its original form. A shoe is a covering for the foot. The most common material for making this covering is perhaps leather. Mending shoes may refer to the process by which shoes are mended, shoes are repaired. But I think there is at least one more way in which this title can be interpreted. Mending shoes could refer to shoes that are mending, shoes that mend. This may sound far-fetched, but as we read the poem, as we complete reading the poem, I think this interpretation, this rather weird interpretation, may appear to be quite plausible. Hanging curtains can refer to the process of hanging curtains, the process by which curtains are hung. But hanging curtains can also refer to curtains that are hanging. Similarly, mending shoes can refer to the process by which shoes are mended. But mending shoes can also refer to shoes that are mending. Now, what are shoes mending? What do we mean by saying that the shoes are mending? Well, these things are sure to become a little more clear by the time we complete reading the poem. I would like to add that the shoe is a powerful symbol, a symbol with great sociological, historical, anthropological depth, especially in the context of India. Those who mend shoes, cobblers, have historically been placed at the lowest, at the bottom of society, at the lowest rungs of society in most parts of the world, particularly in India. The shoe is a loaded symbol, and I'm sure that the poet has these profundities in mind, these nuances in mind, while choosing this title, Mending Shoes. The cobbler sits under the neem, mending shoes, humming to himself unmindful of the day coming to a close. This is a typical Indian scene. You could find such a scene in any Indian town or city. The cobbler sitting under the neem. The cobbler is the person who mends shoes, who cobbles shoes. Cobbling means to repair, especially to repair in a rather clumsy manner, to patch up. You must not confuse the cobbler with the shoemaker. The shoemaker makes shoes, manufactures shoes. The cobbler repairs them. The cobbler sits. I've already said that the cobbler is usually at the very bottom of the society. In the Indian caste system, the cobbler occupies an extremely low position. The cobbler sits under the neem. The neem tree. The neem is a tropical tree, a subtropical tree, a very hardy tree. It can survive without much water. Its wood is termite resistant. Its seeds, its fruits are used for making neem oil. I think the Sanskrit word for neem is nimba. The neem is also known as margosa. The neem is also known as Indian lilac. And I think the botanical name of neem is Asadiracta indica. The cobbler sits under the neem. Is it possible to draw a parallel between the man and the tree? The cobbler sits under the neem. The neem is a very ordinary tree, a very hardy tree, a tree which is very commonly found in tropical, subtropical regions. Are these characteristics common to the cobbler? The cobbler is ubiquitous, found everywhere in India. Just as the neem is a very ordinary tree, the cobbler is a very ordinary person. Like the neem tree, the cobbler is a hardy character, a person who can survive in the most difficult of circumstances. And indeed, the life of a cobbler in India is seldom free from difficulties. Mending shoes. The cobbler here is doing what every cobbler is expected to do. Mending shoes. He is carrying out his profession. He's repairing shoes. The cobbler at work. Mending shoes. Thus the poem opens with the picture of a cobbler at work. The protagonist is a very ordinary man. He is the lowest of the low, the humblest of the humble. He is the ultimate common man. And I would like to observe that this is a typical touch of the poet. E.V. Ramakrishnan likes to write about very ordinary persons, the common men and the common women. He likes to find his protagonists in persons who would otherwise be ignored in Indian society. The cobbler sits under the neem, mending shoes, humming to himself. The cobbler is humming to himself. To hum means to make a steady, low sound, low, steady sound, low, steady, continuous sound. We speak of the humming of the bees. But here it means to sing without opening the mouth, to sing without parting the lips. He is singing a song to himself, but he does not open his lips, open his mouth, part his lips, unmindful of the day coming to a close. Unmindful, unaware not conscientiously attentive, unmindful of the day coming to a close. The sun has set, the day is ending, the night is about to begin, it's almost dusk. But the cobbler is very much involved in his work, and he is humming to himself. He is not even aware of the fact that the day is coming to an end. I would like to work out a contrast between this behavior of the cobbler and the behavior of some of the teachers in the university departments, in the college departments. When they hear the last bell, they rush out to the college building. They rush out of the university building as if the building has caught fire. Here you have a cobbler without education, without any status, without any money, doing his work with complete dedication, humming to himself, unaware that the day is coming to a close, unaware that the day is coming to an end. What can we say about the cobbler, about the life of the cobbler? The cobbler seems to be loving his work, enjoying his work. He seems to be at peace with himself and his world. This is a great lesson for all of us. Let us not think that money will bring us peace. Let us not think that power will bring us peace. Let us not think that the trappings of material wealth will bring us peace. Here is a cobbler with very few material possessions, with very little money, occupying a very low rung in society, lacking in education, in status, and he seems to be at peace with himself and with his world. I watch his elegant hands weave in and out of my tattered shoes. I watch, I observe, I look attentively. I don't just look, I don't just see, I watch, I observe. I watch his elegant hands. Elegant, beautiful word. Stylish, graceful, attractive, beautiful. I watch his elegant hands. The speaker finds the hands of the cobbler elegant. Maybe they are extremely well shaped, but more than that, they are extremely skillful. Their movements are graceful. Their movements are attractive. I watch his elegant hands weave in and out. The hands go into the shoe. The hands come out of the shoe. Weave in and out. To go in and then come out. We often speak of weaving in and out of the traffic. You're driving a car and you are in a hurry to get home. You weave in and out of the traffic. Weave in and out of my tattered shoes. Tattered means extremely torn, badly damaged, old, torn, damaged, in very bad condition. I watch his elegant hands weave in and out of my tattered shoes. A very graphic picture of the hands of the cobbler at work. And I think that in a very subtle way, in a very nuanced way, the speaker elevates the cobbler into an artist. The cobbler is, of course, repairing the shoes, mending the shoes, but he is an artist. He is extremely skillful. His hands are attractive. and they work hard and they work fast, and the cobbler becomes an artist, and the shoes become his work of art. The pawn shop radio splutters into sudden life. Gorbachev has resigned. Eltsine assumes control of the Commonwealth. The pawn shop radio splutters. Pawn shop is a shop where pan is sold. Pan is a Hindustani word, a Hindi word for beetle, chewing pan, the very common habit in many parts of India. Pan includes betel nuts and betel leaves and perhaps also tobacco. The pawn shop radio. A pawn shop is typically a very small shop where not just pan but perhaps a few other things are also available. The pawn shop radio. Radio, I don't know how many of you have seen a radio. You listen to the radio, you watch television. The arrival of the television resulted in the demise of the radio. The radio is an instrument which carries out the wireless transmission and reception of electric impulses or signals by means of electromagnetic waves. A radio is typically rectangular in shape. The pawn shop radio splutters. To splutter means to make a series of unclear sounds, choking sounds, coughing sounds. To splutter means to make a series of explosive noises, explosive sounds in quick succession, which are unclear. I think now you must be getting an idea of the experience of listening to a radio. The pawn shop radio splutters into sudden life. Has it been switched on? Has it just been switched on? It was giving the impression of being dead. No sound was emanating from it. But suddenly, a quick succession of explosive sounds, choking sounds, unclear noises, explosive sounds emanates from it. It is as if it has suddenly come to life. Perhaps the pawn shop man has switched on the radio. The pawn shop radio splutters into sudden life. Gorbachev has resigned. Eltsine assumes control of the Commonwealth. Gorbachev is Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, the last president of the Soviet Union. And Eltsine is Boris Eltsine, the first president of Russia. The reference here is to Gorbachev handing over power to Eltsine. It took place in 1991, a momentous event in world history. The Soviet Union, in the throes of dissolution, and Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, handing over power to Eltsine, the first president of Russia. Gorbachev has resigned. Eltsine assumes control of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is, of course, a reference to the Soviet republics, the Commonwealth of the Soviet republics. I would like to draw your attention to the extremely skillful manner in which the poet interweaves the local and the global. On the one hand, you have the cobbler, you have the pawn shop, and you have the radio, perhaps. They represent the local. But what does the radio say? The radio suddenly comes to life and splutters about the change of guard in the Soviet Union. Gorbachev has resigned and Elstein has taken over. An event, a momentous event in world history. Here we find the dovetailing, the deft dovetailing of the local and the global. There are a couple of things I would like to add. The cobbler is a small man. So is the pawn shop man. On the other hand, Gorbachev and Elchin are big men. But the small men and the big men live in the same world. And though thousands of miles away from each other, are quite capable of coming into conjunction with each other, at least through the radio. Gorbachev and Elchin certainly wear shoes. And the shoes have to be repaired, the shoes have to be mended. And so they are dependent on the cobbler. Pan symbolizes all edible stuff. Pan symbolizes food. Gorbachev and Elchin eat as orphan as any other person. So, it can be argued that Gorbachev and Elchin are dependent on the pawn shop man, taking pan as the symbol for edible stuff. When we read between the lines and beyond the lines, we find the very subtle message that the small men and the big men live in the same world, and that the big men are dependent on the small men. The little men and the great men live in the same world, and the great men are dependent on the little men. And this is indeed a very powerful message. When the second stanza opens, the thematic focus of the poem shifts from international affairs to local matters. The shoe, or rather the shoes, are once again the focus. The pair of shoes is once again the focus of the poem. The cobbler threads the frayed ends of worn-out joints. What does the cobbler do? He threads. Thread is here used as a verb. Thread has numerous meanings, as noun, as verb. Here it means stitches. Threads the frayed ends, worn ends. When something is frayed, the ends are worn and the threads are coming out. When something is frayed, it is badly damaged on its ends. The cobbler threads the frayed ends of worn-out joints. The shoe is held together by a series of joints, and the ends of the joints are frayed, are tattered, are extremely damaged. The cobbler threads the frayed ends of worn-out joints. What does the cobbler do? He stitches together the damaged ends of the worn-out joints to wear a shoe, to put on a shoe. But to wear also means to be damaged as a result of use or overuse. There is the famous Fabian principle in warfare: wear the enemy out. Don't engage with your enemy in pitched battles. Don't engage with your enemy in a series of serious conflicts. Instead, play with your enemy. Keep the war continuing. Longer, make it longer and longer. Let the war last longer and longer. And the enemy will be worn, will be exhausted, will be tired, will get fed up with the game and accept defeat without being actually defeated. He restores a sense of shape. The completely damaged pair of shoes now returns to shape. You cannot say that it returns to shape, it returns to a semblance of shape. He restores a sense of shape. A sense of shape. You're feeling that there is shape, something similar to shape, a semblance of shape, but not exactly shape. He restores a sense of shape. I think I will have to correct myself. I thought that the cobbler was restoring a sense of shape to the pair of shoes, a semblance of shape to the pair of shoes. But that is, of course, what he does. But that is not what the poet says. The poet says, I quote, he restores a sense of shape to the ruins of my journeys from the plains of Deccan to the palm shade of my village. It is not merely to the pair of shoes that a sense of shape is restored. Equally importantly, or even more importantly, to the ruins of my journeys. The speaker is a traveler, and the journeys are ruined. What is ruin? To damage very badly, to injure very badly, to destroy. Here, the noun form, what remains after something has been destroyed? The ruins of Nalanda, the ruins of the ancient capital of the kingdom, the ruins of the bombed city. He restores a sense of shape to the ruins of my journeys. My journeys are in ruins. They have lost their shape completely. And the cobbler is giving back, if not shape, a semblance of shape, something similar to shape, to my journeys, which are in ruins. And the journeys are between the plains of Deccan and the palm shade of my village. I think it would have been more correct if the poet had written the Deccan, the plains of the Deccan, rather than the plains of Deccan. I know that it is very dangerous to correct poems which are not my own, but somehow I felt tempted to point this out. The Deccan, the Punjab. Journeys from the plains of Deccan to the palm shade of my village. Deccan, the English word Deccan, is an anglicized version of the Sanskrit word Dakshina, which means south. The Deccan Plateau. The reference here is to the Deccan Plateau. And a plateau is an area of land which is plain and which is on a higher level than the land around it. That's precisely how the Deccan Plateau is. The Deccan Plateau is a large plateau in peninsular India between the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats, covering large parts of the contemporary Indian states of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana. I think A.V. Ramakrishnan wrote this poem when he was in Maharashtra. My journeys from the plains of Deccan to the palm shade of my village, Deccan. I'm reminded of the Deccan Queen, which is one of my favorite railway trains. The Deccan Queen connects Mumbai to Pune. It's the fastest train between Mumbai and Pune. And when I first went to Mumbai decades back as a schoolboy, it was known as Bombay, and Pune was known as Pune. And even in those days, you had the Deccan Queen, the most prestigious and the fastest railway train between Mumbai, what is now Mumbai, and what is now Pune. All that is by the way. Ruins of my journeys from the plains of Deccan to the palm shade of my village. Obviously a reference to Kerala. E.V. Ramakrishnan was born in Payanur in Malabar, and Kerala is the land of the coconut palm. In fact, the name Kerala means the land of the coconut tree. I think we would be right if we interpret the journeys referred to in this poem as journeys connecting the Deccan Plateau, where the poet spent much of his working life, and Kerala, where he was born and where he had his schooling and his collegiate education. Palm shade of my village. The coconut palm is the most appropriate, the most pertinent symbol of Kerala. If there is no coconut palm, if there is no coconut palm, there is no Kerala. As I said, Kerala is the land of the coconut tree. Palm shade of my village. The village nestles in the midst of coconut groves. Life in the village proceeds in the shade of the coconut tree. But what exactly is the speaker trying to say? He restores a sense of shape to the ruins of my journeys. How do you interpret it? As I said, when I read the poem for the first time, I thought that the speaker was discussing how the cobbler was able to restore shape to the shoes. But that's not the case. Though, of course, that is also the case. By restoring shape, or at least a semblance of shape to the shoes, the cobbler restores a sense of shape to the ruins of my journeys, from the plains of Deccan to the palm shade of my village. What is the speaker trying to put across? I think that by restoring shape or something similar to shape to the shoes, the cobbler is restoring shape to the journeys of the speaker, because nothing can be more wretched, nothing can be more unbearable than a journey wearing a pair of shoes completely out of shape. By giving back shape to the shoes, or at least by giving back a semblance of shape to the shoes, the cobbler ensures that the speaker's journeys become more comfortable. Without the shape of the shoes, the journeys were not journeys at all. They were only ruins of journeys. But now He restores a sense of shape to the ruins of my journeys. So, so on one level, the cobbler restores shape to the shoes. On another level, the cobbler restores shape to the journeys of the speaker. I think at least one more level of interpretation remains. The speaker has returned to Kerala. The speaker has returned to his homeland, to his native land, to his ancestral village, after his long journeys through the plains of the Deccan. And it is only when he reaches his ancestral village is only when he reaches his home do the journeys attain any meaning. And the cobbler putting the shoes back into shape symbolizes the life of the speaker, which has been in ruins and which is now put back into shape by the simple fact that he has returned to his ancestral village. The journeys of the speaker through the plains of the Deccan symbolize the journeys of the life of the speaker, which are completely meaningless until the journeys conclude in the ancestral village, in the home, in the family home of the speaker. I am suddenly overcome by a wave of nostalgia. Nostalgia has always been a very powerful emotion in me. Usually you experience nostalgia when you are away from your home. But here I am in my ancestral village, in which my family has lived from the 16th century onwards, in a property. Here I am in a property which is part of an estate granted by a king to my family in the 18th century. And still I feel overwhelmed by a sense of nostalgia, and I find myself on the brink of tears. I am also reminded of the poem My Grandmother's House of Kamala Das, which I have always believed is one of the most beautiful, one of the most moving, one of the most powerful poems in Indian writing in English. There is a house now far away where once I received love. That woman died. The house withdrew into silence. Snakes moved among books. I was then too young to read, and my blood turned cold like the moon. I quote from memory, and I hope that the quotation is accurate. I am glad he has given my trespasses. This is a rather tricky line. How shall we explain it? I am glad he has given my trespasses. He is the cobbler. I am happy, I am glad. I'm happy that He has given shape to my trespasses. He has provided shape, or at least a semblance of shape, to my shoes. And consequently, He has provided shape, or at least a semblance of shape, to my trespasses. To trespass means to go into a place where you are not welcome. Not just you are not welcome, you're not allowed to go. I cannot trespass into my own property, but I can trespass into a property where I am not legally allowed to enter. Sometimes you find boards. When I was a child, I was in the habit of reading boards very carefully and trying to make out what they meant, trying to make sense of what was written on those boards. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Legal action will be taken against those who enter this property without the permission of the owner. Trespassers will be prosecuted. But now, what has trespassing to do with what we are discussing in this poem? I would like to put forward the reading that the speaker's journeys in the Deccan, the plains of the Deccan, the speaker's journeys outside Kerala, the speaker's journeys outside his ancestral village are all an exercise in trespassing. Is the speaker trying to suggest that he is not really welcome in all those places where he went? That he was not merely a traveler, he was also a trespasser. The speaker cannot trespass into his own ancestral village, into his own family home. But wherever else he went, he felt he was an outsider. He felt he was an alien. He felt that he was unwelcome. He felt that he was not allowed, and he was in fact a trespasser. I would like to bring this part of the poem into conjunction with a sentence from The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, in which Arundhati Roy refers to what is known as the Gulf phenomenon. The people of Kerala migrating to the Gulf in order to work there and make money. They do make money, but the Gulf is a faraway place and they are quite unhappy there. I shall read to you the sentence. Past the new, freshly baked, iced Gulf money houses built by nurses, masons, wire benders, and bank clerks who worked hard and unhappily in faraway places. Unquote. I would like to go a step further. The word trespass has another meaning. It's an archaic meaning, and the word is seldom used in that sense today. Trespass means sin, offense. You find it in the Lord's Prayer. I was educated in a Catholic school, and every morning we began the day, the working day, by reciting the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Here, trespass is used first as a noun and then as a verb. Trespass here means sin, offense. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. I don't know whether it would be far-fetched to see the journeys of the speaker in the poem under consideration as a sort of trespass. The speaker, by leaving his ancestral village, leaving Kerala, has committed sin. And by putting the shoes of the speaker back into shape, the cobbler is facilitating the committing of this sin. Through the tip of his needle, the highways of the homeland are stitched back into a map of return journeys ready for use. Here the speaker amplifies on what has already been said. The cobbler uses his needle to stitch. The needle is perhaps the most important instrument used by the cobbler. But the reference to the needle reminds me of something, reminds me of a passage in the Bible. It's one of the most famous passages in the Holy Bible. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. It's one of my favorite biblical passages. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Luke 18:24-25. As I have already pointed out, here the speaker tries to amplify on what has already been said in the poem. Through the tip of his needle, the highways of the homeland are stitched back into a map of return journeys ready for use. The cobbler uses his needle, more specifically the tip of his needle, which is pointed, which is sharp, in order to put back into shape not merely the shoes, not merely the journeys of the speaker, not merely the life of the speaker, but something even more vast, the highways, the map of his homeland. The highways, the homeland are stitched back into a map of return journeys. The highways are stitched back. The map of return journeys is stitched back, ready for use. If the shoes are not in shape, as far as the speaker is concerned, the highways are not in shape. The map of return journeys is not in shape. And the speaker cannot embark on his journeys through the highways. The speaker cannot travel to the map. A highway is of course a major road connecting towns and cities. When the speaker wants to return from his homeland, from Kerala to the Deccan, he has to travel through the highways. A couple of years back, I read the novel The Lincoln Highway by the American author Amor Towles. The novel is about young men embarking on a long road trip through the Lincoln Highway. And the Lincoln Highway, you must remember, is one of the earliest transcontinental highways to be created in America. And even today it remains an iconic road. We now move to the last stanza. Now the shoes belong to the road, to the vagaries of the weather. This is a very interesting passage. Now the shoes belong to the road. To belong to. If something belongs to you, it's your property. This house belongs to me. It's my property. Now the shoes belong to the road. The question here is, to whom does the pair of shoes belong? It was the cobbler who put the pair of shoes back into shape. But does it belong to him? Certainly not. It does not belong to him. We think that it belongs to the owner of the pair of shoes. But is it really true? The speaker says, now the shoes belong to the road. Because the control over the shoes, the decision on how long the shoes should last, the decision on what shape the shoes should assume is decided not by the cobbler at all, not by the owner, but by the road, to the vagaries of the weather. Where the weather is the condition of the atmosphere at a particular place, at a particular point of time. Whether it's raining, whether it is sunning, whether it is dry, whether it is windy, whether it is hot, whether it is cold. The vagaries of the weather, the vagaries, the unexpected and inexplicable changes which cannot be controlled, but which are crucial, which can crucially alter the situation. You think it's going to be a bright day, you put on your pair of shoes, and then it starts raining. The vagaries of the weather. The shoes, the pair of shoes does not belong to the cobbler, does not belong to the owner. It belongs to the road, to the vagaries, and to the vagaries of the weather. Because the destiny of the pair of shoes is going to be decided by the road and the vagaries of the weather. To whom does something belong? It's a great question. It's a sociological question. It's an ideological question. It's a philosophical question. It's even a religious question. In the Bible, it is said that everything belongs to God. Let me try to remember the exact words. I quote, everything belongs to the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 10:14-17. The clamor of crows sucks up the last drops of daylight. The clamor of crows. Clamor means noise, confused noise. The crow is a large bird, black in color, with an unpleasant cry, with a raucous cry. The clamor of crows. You find crows everywhere in India. The clamor of crows sucks up the last drops of daylight. See how beautifully the poet connects the crows, which are crying unpleasantly, raucously, which are making a lot of noise, and the day coming to an end. The last drops of daylight. It is as if the crows are drinking. It is as if the crows are sucking up the last drops of daylight. Daylight is pictured as a liquid, and the crows are drinking the liquid. And by the time they complete drinking the liquid, they suck up the last drops of the liquid, The liquid called daylight is exhausted. The day comes to an end. On the one hand, you have the crows making a lot of noise. On the other hand, you have the day coming to an end. And the poet beautifully connects the two, the noise of the crows and the day coming to an end. The daylight disappearing, the daylight giving place to darkness, the day giving place to night. I think I should correct myself. I said crows are found all over India, which is quite true. Crows are omnivorous. They love ripe fruit. They also love garbage. They can survive in an urban environment. They can also survive in a rural environment. But when I went to Hyderabad for the first time as a student, I was surprised to find no crows there. I think there are no crows in Hyderabad, or at least hardly any crows in Hyderabad. When I inquired, I was told that the systematic introduction of pigeons had resulted in the disappearance of crows. By the way, Hyderabad is known as Hyderabad Deccan. The railway station is even now known as Hyderabad Deccan, because there is another Hyderabad, Hyderabad Sindh. In pre-independence India, in order to avoid confusion, the two Hyderabaads, one now in Pakistan, the other in India, at that time it was a unified India, and in order to avoid confusion, the two Hyderabaads were known as Hyderabad Sindh and Hyderabad Deccan. The name continues to be used, Hyderabad Deccan continues to be used by the railways. And the main railway station, I think it's the Nampally railway station, is known even today as Hyderabad Deccan. Why does the speaker mention the crows? Obviously because they are there. And as I said, the crows are found everywhere or almost everywhere in India. But I think we can read something more into it. Crows are holy birds in India. They are a link between the material world and the spiritual world. A link between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And there is the Hindu tradition of feeding crows first before feeding the family. I remember both my maternal and paternal grandmothers feeding crows, giving boiled rice to the crows first before serving it to the family. The belief is that the ancestors come in the form of crows, in the guise of crows, to eat the food of the family and to bless the family. Because for the ancestors who are perhaps consuming nectar with the gods, the boiled rice cooked in the kitchen of the family is sweeter than the nectar of the gods. As he gets up to leave, he looks into the shimmering lights of this port city as someone about to renounce the world. Very interesting lines. As he gets up to leave, he looks into the shimmering lights of this port city. The day's work has come to an end. The cobbler has decided to put an end to his day's work. He gets up to leave. He looks into the shimmering lights of this port city. Shimmering means shining in a soft way. You don't say that the sun is shimmering. You say the moon is shimmering through the clouds. The lights are quite distant, quite far. the shimmering lights of this port city. I'm not sure how I can identify this port city, but the best answer to the question is that it is Payanur, the birthplace of the poet. Payanur is surrounded by water. There is the water of the rivers. I think there are 3 rivers there. There is the water of the backwater. There is the water of the sea. And Payanur is a place with a long history. In ancient times, it was a great center of civilization. It was an international port. It has been over the centuries visited by travelers. He looks into the shimmering lights of this port city as someone about to renounce the world. Renounce. Renounce means give up. Renounce means abandon. The Buddha renounced his wife and his child. I think I should correct myself. It would be more accurate to say that Gautama renounced his wife and his child, not the Buddha, because at that time he was not yet the Buddha. But how are we going to explain this? As someone about to renounce the world, he is about to abandon the world. There is a sense of detachment in the look of the cobbler. He feels a sense of detachment. You must remember that the cobbler is at the bottom of the socio-economic scale, and he feels a sense of detachment towards the material world. I have found it often in rather poor people. The rich are always worried about material possessions, are always in pursuit of material possessions, but many of the poor are not at all bothered. They have an attitude of detachment, they have an attitude of renunciation. This could be the explanation. Can we go a step further? In my personal experience, almost all the cobblers I have interacted with are persons who enjoy country liquor. Is this cobbler also such a man? Is he a little drunk? Is he under the influence? And is that the reason for his sense of detachment? For his attitude of renunciation? Shall we go a step further? Is the cobbler a very old man? Is he about to end his earthly existence? Has he a feeling that his life is going to end? Be that as it may, the poet says that the cobbler looks into the shimmering lights of this port city as someone about to renounce the world. Renunciation. It's a beautiful word. The ideal of renunciation in Hindu spirituality. You can write hundreds and hundreds of pages on it. This cobbler, who has very little, probably very little formal education, probably very little exposure to Hindu spirituality, is about to renounce the world. He has the look, he looks into the shimmering lights of this port city as someone about to renounce the world. He knows at this very hour someone is stepping into history with the prescience of a new pair of shoes. I'm really excited, not because the poem is coming to an end. In fact, the poem coming to an end makes me rather sad, but because the last few lines of the poem provide the thematic trajectory of the thematic trajectory of the poem with a dramatic twist. The lowly cobbler becomes a philosopher. The lowly cobbler is raised by the poet to great heights of philosophy. And now we understand why there is detachment in his attitude towards the world, why he looks into the shimmering lights with the attitude of someone about to renounce the world. It is because he knows, because he has knowledge. What does he know? He knows at this very hour someone is stepping into history. He knows that history is being made hour after hour. Please don't think that history is made only at certain points of time. History is made hour after hour. At every point of time, history is being made and remade and perhaps also unmade. He knows at this very hour someone is stepping into history. Hitler invades Poland. Edward VIII abdicates. India gets independence. Putin invades Ukraine. History is being made constantly. Gorbachev submits his resignation. And all these people wear shoes. You step into history not barefooted, but wearing shoes. He knows at this very hour someone is stepping into history with a prescience. Prescience is foreknowledge, insight into the future. Pre means before, science means knowledge. Knowledge of what is going to come, prescience of a new pair of shoes. This is brilliant. What is the prescience of a new pair of shoes? A new pair of shoes. Does it know where it is going? Where it will be a couple of days from now? It has absolutely no idea. You find shoes in the shoe showroom. Look at every pair of shoes there. Does any pair of shoes have any idea regarding where it will travel? It has absolutely no idea. Leave alone a new pair of shoes. Take an old pair of shoes. My pair of shoes. I get up in the morning. Does the pair of shoes know? Does the pair of shoes know where it will be this evening? It could be in Delhi. I might fly to Delhi. It has no idea. Or it could be where it is now. It has no idea. He knows at this very hour someone is stepping into history with the prescience of a new pair of shoes. The pair of shoes has absolutely no prescience. And he knows that someone is stepping into history. Those who step into history also do not know what is going to happen. All that we know about the future is that we do not know. And even the great figures of history, Mahatma Gandhi, for example, Jawaharlal Nehru, for example, did they know that India would become independent in 1947? Certainly not. If the Labour Party had not come to power in the elections after the Second World War, if the Conservatives had won as it had been widely predicted, India would certainly not have become independent on August the 15th, 1947. You can never say what is going to happen. The only knowledge which we have about the future is lack of knowledge. The cobbler knows this. The cobbler knows that he does not know. The cobbler knows that not just he, nobody knows anything about the future. The future is a mystery. In fact, I always tell my students every evening, the past is a dream, the future a mystery. Can we call the cobbler an agnostic? An agnostic is someone who says that you cannot say that there is God. You cannot also say there is no God. Can we call him a nihilist? A nihilist says that everything is nothing. He rejects all morality. He rejects all knowledge. I'm not sure what we are going to call the cobbler. All that I know that he is a philosopher who believes that the only knowledge you have of the future is lack of knowledge. He is a philosopher who believes that you cannot have any insight into the future. He is a philosopher who believes that you cannot predict, you cannot comprehend, you cannot understand the future. What a remarkable poem. What a remarkable journey this has been from the backwater of Kerala through the world of international affairs through the plains of the Deccan to the rarefied heights of, of philosophy. The cobbler is, of course, the central figure in the poem. He is the pivot on which the entire mechanism, the entire thematic mechanism of the poem turns. He is a very interesting protagonist. He comes from the lowest of the low. He belongs to the lowest socio-economic class, and it's quite probable that his ancestors had experienced untouchability, had been subjected to untouchability. He sits under a neem tree, and as he works, he hums to himself. It appears that he exists, he operates, he lives in his own world. He is not much concerned about the real world around him. From the radio in the pawn shop, news about international happenings is broadcast, but it does not seem to affect the cobbler. The cobbler is oblivious to it. He is a skillful craftsman. He provides shape or something like shape to the shapeless shoes using his skills as a cobbler. The speaker believes that the cobbler provides shape not merely to the shoes, not merely to the worn out shoes, but also to the journeys of the speaker, but also to the map of South India. Early in the poem, we find the cobbler humming to himself as he works, and we find that he is unmindful of the day coming to a close. Later, we find him looking into the shimmering lights of the port city as someone about to renounce the world. It is clear that there is a sense of detachment in the cobbler. He seems to be aware that the material reality is not the ultimate reality, that the material reality will not last forever, that though we live in this world, we are not going to live in this world eternally. By the time the poem comes to an end, we realize that the cobbler is no ordinary cobbler. His detachment is rooted in his perspectives. He understands more about this world and the nature of this world than most of us. He realizes that the only thing that we know about the future is that we don't know anything. That the only knowledge that we have of the future is lack of knowledge. The character of the cobbler in the poem displays a striking verisimilitude. There is no doubt that the cobbler in the poem is based on a real life cobbler in the ancestral village, in the native town of the poet. It is because he is rooted in reality that he comes out as such a vibrant, powerful, true to life personality. It can happen that this humble cobbler in E.V. Ramakrishnan's poem is looked upon in the decades and centuries to come as one of the immortal characters in Indian poetry in English. I don't know whether I'm going a tad too far if I say that this cobbler invites comparison with Guru Ravidas, the great Bhakti saint, the great mystic, the great poet of the Bhakti movement, who lived in the 13th or the 14th centuries. There's a dispute over it. And who was himself a cobbler by profession and by caste. Ultimately, a poem is to be read as a poem and not as a report on the autobiography of the poet. However, the fact remains that many of the successful poems in world literature are deeply rooted in the life and personal experience of the poet. Mending Shoes is one such example. E.V. Ramakrishnan was born in Payyanur in Kerala. In fact, in the village of Vilayankode near Payyanur in Kerala. And he had his early education in Kerala. In Payyanur College, Payyanur, Government Banyan College, Thalassery, and Devagiri College, Kozhikode. For his doctoral research, he went to the Deccan, to Marathwada University, where he started his teaching career as well. He continues to live in Western India to this day. The locale of the poem is undoubtedly Kerala, a place in Kerala, most probably Payyanur, or more exactly the poet's birthplace Vilayankode near Payyanur. The most common trees in Kerala are the coconut tree and the neem tree, and both are mentioned in the poem. The pan shop gives the Kerala village its identity, and we indeed find a pan shop in the village in the poem. There are plenty of crows in Kerala, and I think there's hardly any place in Kerala without crows, and the crows are indeed mentioned in the poem. The shimmering lights of this port city could be an allusion to Payyanur, which, as I've already said, is surrounded by water. The water of the sea, the water of the rivers, the water of the backwater. And it is a long history of being an international port in ancient times and a great civilizational center at that. It is possible to relate the journeys in the poem through the plains of the Deccan with the actual life of the poet. For E.V. Ramakrishnan spent long decades in the Deccan, in the plains of the Deccan, first as a research scholar, as a doctoral research scholar, and then as a teacher. Even the radio spluttering into sudden life, announcing the resignation of Gorbachev and the fact that Yeltsin has taken control, has a Kerala touch, because the people of Kerala keenly follow politics, even international politics. I understand that in personal life, E.V. Ramakrishnan is a very sensitive human being, deeply concerned about the lower echelons of society. And this concern has perhaps dictated the choice of protagonist in this poem. Only a person like E.V. Ramakrishnan could have chosen the humble cobbler as the central figure for his poem. And only a person like E.V. Ramakrishnan could have elevated him to the level of a great philosopher. Not just a great philosopher, a great artist, a great philosopher, a great human being. and perhaps also a great mystic. As I've already observed, I don't know whether it is a bit far-fetched. We can attempt to work out a comparison between the cobbler in this poem and Guru Ravidas, the great Bhakti saint, mystic, philosopher, poet, social reformer, who himself was a cobbler by profession, a cobbler by caste. The long and the short of the discussion is that we are able to locate strong autobiographical elements in Mending Shoes, and it is this presence that gives the poem its power and its beauty. What is the message that the poem has to give? A poem should be read as a poem. A poem should be seen as a poem and not as a message box. It is not for the reader to search for messages in a poem. A poem should be read and enjoyed as a poem. However, the fact remains that some very appropriate and powerful messages are dovetailed into the text of Mending Shoes. First of all, let us take the choice of protagonist. The author's choice of protagonist. The protagonist is not Gorbachev or Elchin, but a cobbler. The choice itself has a message to give. The little men are as important to society as the big men, as the great men. The society needs cobblers as much as, or even more than, it needs Gorbachevs and Elchins. The second message we get is that society cannot operate without the little men. Look at the great service rendered by the cobbler in the poem. If the cobbler had not been there, the shoes would not have been put into shape. The journeys of the speaker would not have been put into shape. Even the life of the speaker would not have been put into shape. The cobbler is a little man, no doubt, from the perspectives of society. But as the poem progresses, we realize that he is a great artist, he is a great creator. He is a Michelangelo, he is a Leonardo da Vinci when it comes to mending shoes. The cobbler is actually a great artist, a great creator, a great recreator, an expert craftsman. And we have to realize that the little men are in fact great men. There is at least one more way in which the poem makes us realize that the cobbler, though a little man from the perspectives of society, though a little man on the socio-economic scale, is a great man indeed. His detachment to his environment, his lack of involvement in material pursuits, his innate sense of philosophy, all these make us realize that the cobbler is in fact a philosopher. The cobbler has a greater understanding of life, of this world, than most of us. The cobbler lacks education, perhaps, but he more than makes up for it through his intuition, through his innate philosophical sense. By the time the poem comes to an end, we realize that the cobbler is not merely a great artist, but also a great philosopher. In fact, a latter-day Guru Ravidas. Above all, E.V. Ramakrishnan's Mending Shoes teaches us the great lesson that we should not look down upon anybody or anything. On the other hand, we should always be willing, we should always be prepared to learn from every body and everything. Mending Shoes is a free verse poem. It is organized in 3 stanzas. The diction is everyday. The tone is conversational. In fact, the tone is more prose-like than poetic. The poem presents a slice of life, and so the technical aspects of the poem, the stylistic aspects of the poem are very appropriate. There is no attempt on the part of the poet to surprise or shock the reader. The author does not indulge in unnecessary pyrotechnics. It is an everyday poem which captures a slice of everyday life. The poet has chosen very appropriate images for the poem. The images are everyday, ordinary, very much in sync with the thematics of the poem. We have images of Kerala life, the pawn shop, for example, the radio in the pawn shop, for example. We have nature images, the neem tree, the palm shade, the crows, the road image, the highway image, the journey image. All these contribute to the strength and power of the poem. The central symbol in the poem is, of course, the shoes. The pair of shoes is on one level just a pair of shoes belonging to the speaker, tattered, worn out, and the pair of shoes is put back into shape or something like shape by the cobbler. However, there is more to it than meets the eye. The pair of shoes can be seen as a symbol. It can be seen as a work of art. And immediately the cobbler is elevated to the level of a great artist, a Michelangelo or a Leonardo da Vinci. And like the great artist, with skill, with patience, the cobbler returns shape or something like shape to the pair of shoes. On another level, the shoes can symbolize journeys. If the pair of shoes is not there, there is no journey. And so the shoes are a symbol for the journeys undertaken by the speaker. Yet another level we can go to and find that the pair of shoes symbolizes the map of India, or at least the map of South India. When the cobbler provides shape to the shoes, stitches the shoes back into shape, he also stitches the map back into shape. Finally, the pair of shoes stands for life itself. Just as the life of the individual is at the mercy of the vagaries of fortune, the life of the pair of shoes is at the mercy of the vagaries of the weather. Thus we find profound symbolism in the poem. An allusion is an indirect reference. An allusion is designed to bring something to the mind of the reader without explicitly stating it. There are at least 3 significant allusions in Mending Shoes. In the first stanza, there is an allusion to international affairs, to the resignation of Gorbachev, and to the fact that Yeltsin has taken over, has taken control of the Commonwealth. But I think this is more a reference than an allusion. In the second stanza, there is a biblical allusion. I am glad he has given my trespasses. This is an allusion to the Lord's Prayer, where it is said, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And in the last few lines of the poem, where the cobbler is elevated to the level of a philosopher, there is a hidden allusion to Guru Ravidas, the great cobbler philosopher of the Bhakti movement. A remarkable feature of the poem is the repeated use of caesura. Caesura is a pause or a break in the middle of a line. Usually, a pause or a break occurs at the end of a line. But in the case of caesura, the pause or the break, signified by a semicolon or a full stop, is found in the middle of a line. In the present poem, the poet again and again makes use of caesura. A couple of examples may be given. In the second stanza, worn out joints stop, he restores a sense of shape. Worn out joints stop, he restores a sense of shape. In the last stanza, off the weather stop, the clamor of crows sucks up. Off the weather stop, the clamor of crows sucks up. The repeated use of caesura slows down the pace of the poem. The poem moves forward at a slower pace because of the repeated use of caesura. It also makes the poem more enjoyable and more comprehensible, as the reader gets more time to allow what the poem says to sink into his mind. Mending Shoes by E.V. Ramakrishnan is an intensely personal poem. It is about one man's journeys through the plains of the Deccan. It is about one man's return to his ancestral land. It is about his personal experience in his hometown. Thus, it's a very personal poem based on individual experience. But there are other dimensions to the poem. There is a sociological dimension. There is an artistic dimension. There is a political dimension. There is a religious dimension. There is even a philosophical dimension. Let us read the poem as an intensely personal poem. But let us also not forget the presence of these numerous dimensions.